Hi, it's Troy Elder with Elder's Best Baking. We're here this week to continue our baking series, and we're going to kind of tone it down a little bit this week. We're not going to be doing sourdough breads, which is a pretty intensive way to start out a baking channel, but we're going to go back to the basics and just do some simple cookie recipes, stuff people make at home all the time, and maybe I'll give you a few tips here and there that will help step your game up a little bit. Who knows? But this week, well, I'll let you guess here. We got some quick oats, not rolled oats, oddly enough. I'll explain that in a little bit. Some flour with a little bit of baking soda. I went ahead and added that in there. There's no point wasting it. I'm just for just a teaspoon of baking soda. Some butter, some regular sugar, and some light brown sugar. A couple eggs, some cinnamon, some vanilla, and I have some raisins here soaking in liquid. And why don't I have them soaking in liquid? Well, there's a reason for that too. But stay tuned to find out on this week's episode of Elder's Best Baking and Beyond, Oatmeal Raisin Cookies. Okay, and we're back, and you might have noticed I've mixed things up a little bit here, and there's a reason for that. First off, the first step in every cookie recipe is almost always the cutting of the butter and the sugars, okay? And before I get to mixing those sugars, we're going to talk a little bit about the white and the brown sugars and their role in cookies. The reason that you use two different kinds of sugar is that they have different properties. If I were to use just all white sugar in this recipe, the cookies would kind of just spread out thin and wouldn't have much body to them, and they'd be a little too crispy, okay? And when you introduce brown sugar, what you're doing is you're adding some depth of flavor along with moisture, which is necessary, okay? Now, light brown sugar, like you find at the grocery store, it's probably about, I don't know, about 5% of molasses. And that's something a lot of people don't know, is that brown sugar is just simply white granulated sugar mixed with a little bit of molasses. Now, you can get the dark brown version of sugar, and I would recommend that in this recipe, but since I don't have any dark brown sugar on hand, I'm going to make my own just simply by mixing my light brown sugar with a little bit of molasses. And it doesn't take much here, okay? It was only 5% to begin with, but a little bit more will hurt. All right. And then I'll just mix this together a little bit and make my light brown sugar into a little bit more of dark brown sugar. Now, what is it about dark brown sugar that's helpful or beneficial in cookies besides just the fact that it's an element of moisture? Well, it also has a higher pH value than white sugar. The white sugar is generally a neutral sugar. It means it has a neutral pH, and it doesn't interact with the leavening agent much. That's why you get those flat cookies instead of a more cakey or thicker cookie when you only use white sugar instead of adding brown sugar. Now, the acidity in the molasses will interact with the baking soda, which is the leavening agent in this recipe. And that's going to give us a cookie that is a little bit more cakey, but chewy at the same time, okay? So, I mean, I don't know if you can tell there, but the sugar is turned from a light brown sugar into a dark brown sugar just by adding that little bit of molasses, okay? So I'm not going to put you through the torture of listening to this KitchenAid through these AirPods like I did last week. But despite this, I'm going to start out by putting this into my KitchenAid and running it on about speed 4 for a few minutes, 1 or 2, just to get the butter broken up and nice and smooth. And a little bit lighter, I want to lighten up a little bit. And another key thing, room temperature ingredients. Whenever you're baking, you want all your ingredients to be room temperature. Your butter, dairy, eggs, it doesn't matter. You want them to be room temperature, okay? So we've got room temperature butter, and I'm gonna start off by creaming that up a little bit on speed 4 in a regular mixer. If you don't have a KitchenAid stand mixer, that's fine. Use your hand mixer on like a medium speed, medium to medium high speed, and start with your butter and cream your butter, make it a little bit lighter and fluffier, and then you're going to pour the white sugar in slowly. And what that white sugar is going to do is it's got like little shards of glass cutting through that butter, and it's going to increase the volume of the butter and lighten it up and even change its color a little bit. And we're going to start with the white sugar first because I want that body to build up. If you put the brown sugar in with the light, it will just bog it down, and it doesn't provide very good results. So I'll start out by creaming the butter, add the sugar a little bit at a time to give it a little bit of lift. Then I'll add the brown sugar, again, a little bit at a time. If you bought already dark brown sugar from the store, I would recommend breaking it up by hand as you put it in the mixer, because brown sugar tends to clump, and you don't want any clumps of sugar in your cookies. And one last thing on brown sugar before I cut this video and mix it up is the storage of brown sugar. Now, if you've ever stored brown sugar for any length of time, you'll know that it dries out quickly. And there's a product that you can find on Amazon, but search for humidipacks, and they're usually reserved for like a cigar, humidors and things like that, but they are made to keep things in a specific humidity. And you just throw one humidipack in with your brown sugar container, or just even in the bag with the brown sugar, and that will keep the moisture level of your brown sugar consistent. It'll maintain a relative humidity level of whatever purchase. You can buy 60% humidity, 70%, whatever humidity you choose when you buy your humidipacks. That's the humidity level will stay. And so you can find those online at Amazon and order them, and your brown sugar will never try on you again. All right, I'm gonna mix up this brown sugar, and we'll be back. Okay, I've got just the white sugar cut into the butter, and you can see it's got a much lighter texture to it. It's a different color now. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to show you what that looked like before I put the brown sugar in. So if you're ever making cookies that don't have brown sugar in them, that's what you're looking for right there. A lighter color, fluffier texture. Okay, actually I used speed 6 to achieve this on the KitchenAid instead of speed 4. So don't want to splatter everything everywhere. On your regular stand mixer, you know, go from a medium high, maybe to a high if you're comfortable. If it doesn't throw everything everywhere. And if you can't, stand there with a hand mixer, obviously, and pour sugar in slowly. So just add the sugar in stages and keep going until you get that light, fluffy, airy texture I just showed you. Okay. I'll continue on with the brown sugar here, and we'll go from there. Okay, well, we've got the brown sugar now added, and it's just changed the color, but ever so slightly, and we still have the same texture we were looking for before. And now it comes time to just add the wet ingredients, and this is pretty standard in cookie baking. We start out with creaming the butter and the sugar together, and then we go from there and we add our wet ingredients, which is not a lot in this case. We just have 2 eggs and a teaspoon of vanilla. All right, so I'm gonna add these to the mixture. I'm gonna mix this on about speed 4. I don't need a lot of activity. If you're using a hand mixer, slow it down. You just wanna get this incorporated well. We're not looking to get any volume or any increase in volume. And then after that, we're gonna add our dry ingredients, which of course was just all-purpose flour, some baking soda, some cinnamon, and salt, which I may have omitted earlier in the ingredients list, but you always have salt in sweet goods. Sounds counterintuitive, but people think of salt, they think, ooh, salty flavor, it's salt. Why would you put salt in something sweet? Well, salt is not a salty flavor. Salt is a flavor enhancer. So by adding salt to your sweet goods, you're enhancing the flavor. That's it. You're not going to taste the saltiness. You never will. If you don't believe me, go just get a box of store-bought chocolate cookies or something with an icing on it. Take a couple grains of some sea salt and sprinkle on top of it, and try it then and see if you don't think it tastes a lot better that way than it did without the salt. Promise you it will. All right, so again, for the sake of saving your ears, I'm not going to turn on the mixer. And for this, I'm going to stir together these dry ingredients. I'm just using the whisk attachment that comes with my mixer. No big deal. You just mix together. And as far as salt goes, the type of salt you use does matter. This recipe I'm using here is I'm using a half teaspoon of salt in this. I use kosher salt at home, and this is for half teaspoon of kosher salt. Now, the thing you need to remember about salt or spices in general is the finer they are, the more powerful they are. The finer the grind, that is. So if you have a finely ground salt that's thin at home, you're going to need half as much as I just put in there. If you have a thicker salt, you're going to need double what I put in there. But that's true of basically any herb or spice. It's ground into, the finer it is ground, the more potent its flavor, period. So with kosher salt, we're using half teaspoon. Just mix those together with the dry ingredients. I'm going to mix these in the mixer on speed 4. If you get a hand mixer, medium speed, until they're just incorporated. And then I'm going to add this flour. And I'm going to add this flour or dry mixture, I should clarify. And I'm going to add the dry mixture, and I'm going to incorporate it slowly until it's almost completely incorporated. I want to see a little bit of flour left over, because when you incorporate flour into anything that you're mixing with a mixer or by hand, it doesn't matter. When you mix flour with liquid, you're creating gluten. And gluten is that stretchy lattice compound in your baked goods that creates structure. But in a cookie, you don't want a super chewy cookie. I mean, you want to have some chew, of course, but you don't want it to, take your grandmother's dentures out just trying to finish one cookie. So we're going to spend as least amount of time as possible incorporating the flour. All right, and then from that point forward, we'll be incorporating just the finished ingredients. In fact, this is a pretty basic cookie recipe right up to this point, and you could add whatever afterward. Chocolate chips, it doesn't matter, anything, and then you're going to end up with a pretty good cookie. The only thing is the ratio of those sugars. The white sugar is going to give you more spread and a crispier, crunchier cookie, and the brown sugar is going to give you more cakey, chewy consistency. So just keep that in mind and play around with the ratios. That's totally up to you. If a recipe calls for a cup of sugar and half of it's brown and half of it's white, make 3/4 of it brown and 1/4 of it white. Play around. That's the way you learn. And in baking, that is one of the few things you can play around with. But just keep in mind that the more brown sugar you use, the more liquid that it's going to absorb, and the higher the pH is going to be, so it will interact with your leavening agent and give it more rise. That's all you got to know. All right, we'll be back here shortly, and I'll have incorporated the wet and the dry ingredients, and we'll get to talking about our oats and why does it matter if I use quick oats or rolled oats or minute oats, or what's important about that. Okay, we are back. So I've got the ingredients mixed up, the wet and the dry here, and you can see there's some flour in there. We'll get a glass bowl probably eventually, so you can see in there a little better. I'm not going to pull all that down right now and show it to you. It's just too much of a mess and hassle. But trust me, I just didn't finish mixing that together, and I left a little bit of the dry there. And now we're on to the additives. Like I was saying before, you could, at this point, use whatever and probably turn out with a good cookie. I would add, if you're going to do the chocolate chips, like I said earlier, you're going to need to add a little bit more flour than I added, because this is going to take up, this is going to count towards the dry ingredients. And these are quick oats. These are not the rolled oats like I would prefer, and I would recommend that you use in your recipe. And here's why. rolled oats, I mean, you see steel cut oats, rolled oats. I mean, it's just mind-boggling with all the different oats out there. But rolled oats are just, you know, they're rolled through a steamroller, and then they do apply steam to them and flatten them out just a little bit so that they cook a little bit quicker. And quick cooking oats are rolled even more and flattened out even more so that they will cook faster. But what that ends up giving you, though, is an oat that will absorb more liquid than the one that's just been rolled to a rolled oat and not a quick cooking oat. And that makes a difference here. So what I did in this case, and this is just for me, since I was rummaging through the cabinets and realized that the person who does the shopping for me didn't follow my directions and get rolled oats, and I stumbled across these. I'm making some adjustments. All right, so I used a little bit less dry ingredients. I reduced the amount of oats a little bit. I reduced the amount of flour a little bit. Another thing that I did is I soaked my raisins. Now, why do that in cookies? You've never done that before? Well, here's why. In addition to the extra moisture content I need, if I were to use just regular unsoaked raisins in this, they're going to leach moisture from my cookie anyway. They're going to do what they do when they've been dehydrated, and that is try to rehydrate. So they will pull liquid out of the cookie dough if I don't do it. Now, you can soak them in brandy, you can soak them in whatever, rum, I don't care. I just used hot water. The thing is I want them to plump up. The recipe calls for about a cup, and you can see after I soaked them, they plumped up to about a cup and a half there. But that should change the end results for me. This should give me the consistency that I'm looking for. So I'm going to add these two ingredients in with the mixer and mix them on reasonably medium speed. 4 is good for me on a stand mixer, medium on a hand mixer if you're using that, or by hand. You can put them by hand. In fact, I'll probably slow it down to 2 just to mix this in. You know, I want this to incorporate. I do not want to overmix it at all. I want no signs of flour, of course, left behind, but I want it to just barely be combined. And you should strive for the same thing at home. And we'll be back here after I have that done. Again, sparing you the sound of this mixer. Okay, and movie magic. I guess we're back. But we've got a dough here that's been mixed up. Okay, it's holding its shape together well, and the raisins and everything have been nicely incorporated in that. So what I'm going to do now is a necessary step that a lot of people don't take or they like to skimp on, but it's pretty simple, pretty basic thing. We're going to refrigerate this dough, and we're going to do that for about half an hour and give the cookies time to set up. I mean, we've been applying a lot of energy here and getting them mixed up, whether we're doing it with a hand mixer or a machine like I'm using here. We've warmed up these ingredients a little, so we want to give them a chance to chill out, rest, to solidify back up a little bit, and this does actually improve the flavor of the finished product. Just let them sit for a half hour in the fridge. Use that time to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit and get that puppy nice and warm. Some common mistake people make is they think they can start with a cold oven, and you cannot do that. So, you know, take the time to preheat your oven. A half hour is a good amount of time to preheat it. That way you're sure you got a nice hot oven to deal with, to work with. And we'll be back there, and I'll show you how to portion these up and bake them off. Okay, we are back, and over here at the oven, obviously. Sorry, it's like baking station there for a minute. Anyway, dough has been refrigerating for about a half hour. I'm going to use a handy dandy dough scoop. This one's made for cookies, but you can use a tablespoon at home. I just make them consistent in size as you can. And the reason for that is the same size items bake at the same rate, and you want your cookies to all be done at the same time. So that's really the only reason for that. So I'm just gonna demo one here. I mean, you can do this in your hand too, if you wanna make sure that there's no air bubbles or air pockets in there. It's just round it off with your hand and then place it on the cookie sheet. and fill the cookie sheet, and we're gonna go for 8 to 10 minutes at 375. Pull them out, you know, let them cool on their cooking sheet for about a minute before we pull them off. Pretty standard stuff, but we'll get through that here in no time. Okay, well, it's been about 8 minutes. I'm gonna take these out, and that's what we've got to work with. Sorry, I was hoping to get this done before the maid came in, but as you can see, she's busy with the floors right now. But in any case, like I said, we're gonna let these things cool their right for about a minute. I get a bigger cooking cooling rack, wherever I put that thing. But let's, let me start with a small. And you want to get it pretty, thin, but take the spatula here, and after about a minute, they'll just slip right off. And then we put them on the cooling vessel. And of course, we'll let these cool down completely before jumping into them. But we're gonna go ahead and take off the rest of these. And we'll be back at the end here to give you my opinion on how it turned out. Trying to make do with quick rolled oats instead of regular rolled oats. So, see you shortly. Okay, well, we're back, and our cookies are finished. The last little bit coming out right here. And if you can't tell, they're a little bit darker than maybe the oatmeal cookies you're used to, but that's because of the added molasses that we put in there, and this is the result that you would get if you would use dark brown sugar instead of the light brown sugar. But that's just going to give it a depth of flavor that I'm sure you will appreciate. Now, I have already indulged and tried one of these, I'm not going to lie, and they are pretty tasty. And this shows you that if you don't have the exact ingredients on hand that it calls for, like rolled oats, for example, you got quick oats instead, you can, with a little bit of knowledge, still make do and get nice, chewy oatmeal cookies that Grandma would be proud of. So, give this recipe a try at home. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next week.